Well, good afternoon, everybody. It is noon on March 8th, International Women's Day. And I am Jeff Feldman, the Director of Advocacy and Communications here at the National Association of Social Workers, New Jersey office. And I'm very happy to be here today with Dr. Karie McGuire and Dr. Jamie Wasserman, who will be giving us a short preview of their presentation that they will be providing at the May 1st and 2nd NASW New Jersey Virtual Annual Conference. The title of the presentation is Unwanted Consensual Sex, Addressing the Hidden and Unspoken Education of Submission in Clinical Practice. Definitely a topic that can impact both women and men, but certainly something of relevance today on International Women's Day. So let me welcome you both and I guess share a little bit about how this topic for presentation is important for social workers to consider in the future and something that we should be paying attention to as we move forward in social work practice.
All right, you want me to take that?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, well, thanks, Jeff. So welcome. The reason that we chose this topic and the reason why we like doing presentations on this topic is that consent is a very important issue, and it's a very important issue with men and women, as you mentioned. Our focus is really just on women at this point. We can speak to men also, but on this particular workshop, we're really only speaking about women, young women and older women. And the reason why we're focused on women and the reason why it's such a great topic for a day like today, where it's focused on women, is that consent is a complicated internal process that a lot of laws and a lot of rules and colleges try to turn into a transaction, like say yes every time you mean it, just say no, all those slogans, all the things that we've heard. But what it doesn't take into consideration is the socially constructed internal world of young women as they place themselves relationally with men and they place their social relevance to men through sex and through sexual encounters. So they might be saying yes, and then it seems like it's all systems go, but in reality, internally, what we've learned through my research and through my clinical practice is that they're often compromising their own well-being by saying yes to something they really don't want. They want something other than the sex. They want the relationship. They want to be popular. They want to feel wanted, but they feel really pressured to have sex still. And then they join in on the yes, and they don't really mean yes. And that's a very secret internal process that they don't tell anybody about because they're either ashamed or they don't even know how to articulate it. And so as therapists, we have the opportunity to really explore that in great detail to understand what each woman or young woman's internal assessment is of their own sexuality, their own consent, and whether they're actually having sex they want or they're agreeing to sex they don't want.
Well, thank you so much. That's an interesting discussion topic, and certainly coming from the male side of it and knowing the way that men are socialized and the way that we are brought up in many ways to think about consent. It's certainly interesting because in so many ways, the thought process for men is that we come from a culture where a lot of times the thought is that you just wear somebody down, like you ask them out so many times that eventually they're just going to give up and say yes, or you pester somebody for sex so many times they're just going to get tired of saying no, and then they're going to get sex. And so this is really a way to flip that on its head and bring control back to the woman in the relationship, I guess, as we're discussing today.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we always identify in our presentations that people want to know, like ask us, do we talk to boys? How do we talk in couples about this? But we're really focusing on this, at least for now, until we take it on the road and further, but like really on educating everyone as early as possible. And especially as therapists, we have this unique position to really get in deep in these conversations with our clients in therapy, but also as case managers, as court advocates, as hotline personnel, to really advocate that they really look at this from their own perspective and really, what do they desire? What do they want? And also, how can we educate everyone to have these conversations earlier in their own homes, but also in session, right? Because we can ask these questions because we're asking all the other questions. So we want people to prioritize this topic in their biopsychosocials, in their, therapy sessions, when they're just having these one-off conversations with clients, so that we can get people to think about these things.
Yeah, and I guess, are you able to, without spoiling your presentation, are you able to share a little bit about maybe what's behind this behavior? When women are being pressured for sex or asked for sex, does this play into identity issues or people-pleasing issues? Like, is that kind of at the root of how this is happening?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, we do cover that a lot in our presentation. And the why we call it the education of submission, the subversive education of submission, is from the minute girls are born, they're being viewed as what they look like. Oh, you're so cute, you're so pretty. And now with TikTok and Instagram and these influencers who are all very sexualized, your sexual appeal is more important than anything else. And so if no one is talking to you about that, challenging it, devaluing it, deconstructing it, making it on your own terms, you just follow suit. And by the time you get to talk to somebody who can question that for you or help you think about it, you've already had so much sex you didn't want, or agreed to so many sexual encounters you don't want, because they start at 12 or 13. And if you have a 13-year-old girl or a 12-year-old girl who is valuing themselves for their sexual attractiveness, and some guy finds them sexually attractive, that's a win, but it's really a loss. It's such a complicated, non-neutral event, right? You can't neutralize that. If you don't want it and you do it, it's traumatizing internally to women. And then they just become more and more submissive, and they give in more and more. And they feel like, well, I can't say no, then I'm not going to be attractive anymore. And they don't even have the vocabulary. So what we've learned in the research is the more you practice with young women and girls and older women saying no, having strategies to get out of something, knowing when you actually want it versus they want it, coming to terms with the fact that disappointing men is actually okay. And it doesn't mean that you're not an attractive woman or that you're not of value. So it's really in those, it's deconstructing their entire, the identity politics of women from the minute they're born.
And it's so ingrained in our culture. And granted, there have been some positive changes, particularly in the last decade or two. But I'm a big Marvel Comics fan, and so I actually a couple weeks ago was reading some old issues of the Avengers comic from the 1960s, and the way that they speak about the female superheroes in that comic is, in a lot of ways, similar to the way we're still speaking about women 60 years later, where the men were portrayed as strong and faithful and powerful, and those were the adjectives used to describe them, and the women were described as cute or pretty or fanciful. And when they weren't superheroing, the men were doing work things and the women were going shopping. So it's so deeply embedded. And I guess, as we close for today, maybe do you have any words on ways that social workers can begin to challenge these issues as they come up in therapy? Or are they things that social workers should be bringing up in therapy if they're not coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I think we really encourage just simply just talking about sex and really, like, from the very beginning, where you're in advocacy or prevention, starting it early in those conversations, encouraging people to talk to their moms, their sisters, their best friends, their sports teams, right? All the way through to when we're either getting them in therapy and asking those questions like, what's your social life? What's your sex life? Making it a normal topic, all the way through to like, okay, you've had a lot of unwanted sex. Like, let's unpack that. And how can you how can we empower you to feel like you can do it differently in the future, and sort of just empower women across sort of that spectrum and through their communities. Do you want to add anything to that, Jamie?
Well, yeah, I mean, even if you just did that, like everything you just said, and even if you just start a conversation with a woman that you have in your practice and say, have you ever had sex you don't want? You will hear like, what? I don't know if I've ever had sex I wanted. What is that? Right? Like you'll hear things like this that are, you know, gobsmacking. You're like, oh yeah, right. Of course. That, like, how would you even know if you want sex if your whole design is to be pleasing? You never take that moment where you look inside and go, wait, what do I want here from this? And so it's really taking time to unpack it, turn it upside down, look at it from different angles, and just teach women and teach people in your practice about the socialization that they're subjected to.
Well, thank you both very much. This is really fascinating, and it's clear that there's so much more we can delve into on this topic. You know, it definitely is something that lends itself well to a workshop at our annual conference where Jamie and Karie will be. Are you presenting Sunday or Monday? I can't remember offhand. Do you remember?
No, I feel like the second day, according to the agenda, we're at the last.
Well, the conference is May 1st through 2nd, and you can learn more about it at thefutureofsocialwork.org. Again, thefutureofsocialwork.org. And, you know, the conference is priced to help people this year who may have been struggling due to job issues related to COVID and other issues. We are currently offering the price of $199 for NASW members to earn up to 23.5 credits. So we hope you'll check it out, futureofsocialwork.com. You'll see Jamie and Karie there, as well as dozens of other amazing presenters. So thanks again for your time, Karie and Jamie, and I look forward to speaking to you again and seeing you in May.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, ladies.